EDA Downtown Committee Workshop meeting to order this evening. Karen, could we have you just note roll for note roll rather than doing full roll call?
Yes.
Perfect. And Dan, if you could display the flag, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. And invite everybody to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you want to shut off your camera before you do so, you can shut off your camera in the bottom left of your Zoom tray. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members of the EDA and the Downtown Working Group, thank you for being here this evening. We do have one item of EDA business that we wanted to get some EDA feedback. And so members of the working group, if you will allow us to start on a topic of using EDA fund balance for 2021 business license refunds. It is a topic of conversation that council is currently having. We're looking for some EDA feedback. And again, members of the Downtown Committee, you're welcome to be here as part of this conversation. We just wanted to get some EDA feedback before we move into the meat of tonight's workshop. And also, I suspect it's a topic that is of interest for all members that are here tonight. So with that, Patrick or Dan, I'm not sure which one of you wanted to tee this up.
Yep, I will be happy to. Recent mandates from the governor and the continuing COVID saga has led the council and others to try to take the next step and figure out what might kind of relief there may be for the 2021 year. What was discussed is, and what the city has control of, is licensing, particularly liquor licensing, some massage licensing, but mostly liquor, and the possibility of either not charging for liquor licenses this year or reimbursing for liquor licenses this year, whether it's a full year, whether it's a half year. I think that's something we need to talk about. It is suggested that we try to figure out what's the best way to give the businesses, particularly because it's restaurants, a relief for 2021. The impact, the problem is we have an impact to the general fund of approximately $40,000 to $45,000. And that's particularly difficult this year or in 2021 because of all of the other unknowns that we have at this point. We don't know what state share of revenues are going to be. We don't know what taxes are, how much tax impact there's going to be as far as lost revenue. So we were looking for alternatives on how to find a way to give relief to the businesses, but then also to keep our general fund steady. The general fund steady, again, we're having troubles knowing what the future is going to bring with state share revenues, but we also have dramatically decreased the income from building permits and things like that, as we're seeing some great decreases there. We're seeing decreases in revenue from the judicial system. So we have some issues that we need to face. So what we came up with is there is a fund balance in the Economic Development Fund of approximately $192,000 that has been building over the years and not spent on a regular basis. So we would like to put before the EDA is the possibility that the EDA uses their funds to subsidize or to relieve the liquor license holders of their responsibility for liquor licenses, massage licenses, and anything else that may qualify, to the tune of about, again, max about $45,000. This would do two things. The reason we're suggesting this is because EDA has the funds, the fund balances are there, and we wouldn't have to negatively impact the general fund, which is our day-to-day operations and is basically pretty much unknown for the fiscal year 2021 until the rest of COVID-19 and the state figures out where we're going to go with all this. So that's the suggestion. We want to have a discussion on if that's acceptable to the EDA. I believe it's an appropriate use of EDA funds. It's something that the EDA can do to further help the business owners that are related to licensing and give a positive step to those businesses. So open it up for discussion, but that's kind of just a quick recap of that.
Quick point of clarification, the 45,000 that Patrick mentions is if we were going to provide relief for the full year, and there's been some conversation on do we do 6 months increments or is it the full year? I think council is looking for permission for it to be a full year, knowing that there's a fair amount of uncertainty around 2021. But there are some things that we could do if there was appetite for only a partial year. Just wanted that clarification as well.
Correct.
And open to feedback. Go ahead, Leif.
So is this a refund of license paid, or is it a relief for future, like this is due in January, so we're going to waive it?
Yeah, we haven't figured out quite the mechanics of that, whether we want them to pay first and then refund it, or whether we just say don't bother paying. You know, obviously some of the renewals have started to come in already. Either way, it doesn't matter one way or another. If it's a refund of the full year, or if you decide 6 months, that's easy for us to do. If Karen is more involved with how that operation works, whether it's better to do a refund. Off the top of my head, I think it's better that they pay and then we refund it so that we have some kind of trail to understand what that impact was. But you know, we can talk about that as well. We haven't decided that yet, though.
Well, let me clarify my question. Maybe I wasn't clear. So I mean, COVID really has affected us since the beginning of second quarter through the end of the year, and it's projected to affect us, you know, maybe even the first half. I mean, I think I heard one, like, hey, we could get back to normal in May. Who knows? So are we looking to, that's what I'm like, are we refunding and helping relieve from 2020 fees paid, or are we doing that and we're giving relief for into 2021, not knowing when life's going to get back to normal?
Yeah, we already have addressed 2020's license fees. We actually refunded a portion of those or some of that. This is for the fiscal year or calendar year, which were the same, 2021. Okay. So it's really, the discussion is it all of 2021, because we believe it's going to be a rough road no matter how fast inoculations become or whatever the case may be. I think, to be quite honest with you, I think it's just better for us to do the full year and bite the bullet so that we don't have to go through this twice and we don't have to have talk about whether we should refund half or full. It's not a significant amount of dollars. Like I said, it's like $45,000. It is, again, we're having struggles knowing what the general fund. That's why we're recommending the EDA. So my suggestion is just to do the full year, knowing that even if we get the virus inoculations, you know, mid-year and everything's happy and over, the businesses are still going to be hurting from the first part of the year, particularly with the latest governor's order. We don't know how long, or if there's going to be another one that shuts down bars and restaurants to in-house patrons. So I think the best way to look at this is a full year credit or refund.
Also, typically so we are talking about the 2021 calendar year, and all of those fees are typically paid up front. And so that cash is being asked of businesses now as we're going through that licensing process. And so the opportunity is for us to return that cash or to not require that cash as part of the license, but those renewals are in process right now. And also we are looking to finalize 2021 budgets here at the first meetings in December. So hence kind of the timing of this conversation.
Correct.
Mark, go ahead.
Well, of all the industries that's been damaged through this whole proposition, it's been the hospitality industry. So I'm fully in favor of the EDA money, 45,000 going against all those licensees, and however you want to arrange a payback or what have you. I think it's an appropriate expenditure of money.
I agree.
Thank you. Blake, go ahead. And you're on mute.
Sorry about
There you
that. Question, what does that break down to individually to each? I should probably know this, but what is a license cost for an individual? Does it vary based on if it's beer and wine versus full liquor? Just curious.
Yeah, and Karen can help me here, but off the top of my head, it does depend on what type of license they have. I think we're somewhere at the top license holders in the $3,000 to $3,500 range, and it goes down from there depending on their license. And Karen, if you want to clarify that, please do.
Correct. Yep. So full on sale liquor license would be, and then on sale, and then they can attach Sunday sales onto that would be $3,200. It goes down from there. Wine and malt liquor, I believe, is a $500 fee. Just a regular on sale is $3,000 if they don't have a Sunday. And then I do know, and I don't think we can do anything about this fee. It goes to the state, but there is one or two that have a 2 a.m. liquor license. That's additional fees that they have to pay for that as an add-on to their license, but that gets paid directly to the state of Minnesota. So we are just kind of a pass-through for that. We don't take those funds. But the full on sale is, just over $3,000 down to $500. Liquor license to sell off sale is $200. I think the golf clubs, I think their liquor license is $200 or $300. Massage license is $50. Massage location license is $50. So the biggest impact would be on those on sale liquor licenses, which make up the majority of the liquor licensing at the $3,000 mark.
I will point out when council considered the waiver of fees for 2020 or the refund of fees for 2020, we recognized that the massage therapists were impacted by the shutdown and the second quarter of the year. And we didn't know what the latest round of governor's orders were going to be. And so I think there's room for some conversation around whether or not that should be included. However, as Karen points out, the dollar amount of that is much smaller. And because they are open, maybe there's a reason that those should not be waived. And that's kind of a decision here that we can make in the next couple of weeks as we're kind of finalizing what's included and what's not.
Okay.
Go ahead, Blake.
Another question then. So the 2020 fees, was that refunded? Was that part of the CARES money? Was that used to refund those as part of the CARES, or is that separate?
Yeah, no, I believe the city was reimbursed for the Karen again for the CARES. It was included in the CARES money.
Well, I agree with Mark. I think that this is something that's a kind of a no-brainer, something we can do to help these operators get through this, and I am fully on board with doing that.
Are there any other categories that pay annual license fees that we should be considering that are suffering right now?
Great question. Karen, do you want to just walk through the other categories?
There's other licensing fees. So we have pawn. We have 2 pawn licenses that we do. There's the massage, of course. There is the liquor license fees, and some of those are off sale license, which, they've remained open. And then refuse hauler license fees. The greatest impact makes up the greatest impact on the funds is liquor licensing. So we do a total, I believe the total revenue for licensing in all is just over $50,000 or $52,000, something around there. The liquor licensing is going to be making up about $45,000 of that. Or, I mean, the liquor licensing and massage combined makes up about $45,000 of that. And those were the businesses that were the most impacted when we had the full shutdown last spring into the summer. I don't know if massage is fully shut down at this point. I don't think it is. The only thing that is the on sale, restaurants, bars, and the statute allows them to do temporary off sales of either a 6-pack and or a bottle of wine. So that's the maximum that they can sell as a takeaway with the temporary sales.
Yeah, and recent news out of the Capitol is that it was actually in the paper today that it's not so much the off sale. The liquor stores are doing great. I mean, the tax revenue from those sin taxes are coming in, so that means they're doing better than ever. It's really the restaurants and bars and the on-premise sales that are the struggle here so far.
Yeah, and the other piece to that is if they are doing any temporary off sale, they can only do 72 ounces of malt or like malt cider, those kinds of things, and only 750 milliliters of wine, and they have to sell food with that. So if it's a bar and they don't really sell any food that is a takeaway option, they can't sell any takeaway alcohol either.
Mark, go ahead.
Maybe just to further Jen's question about what we could explore. EDA then has a residual fund of about $145,000. And I'm not against at all exploring other opportunities where the EDA directly can support some of those who are not able to gain from the grants that were given earlier. I just don't know what that would be. I just like the idea of exploring something that's beyond just this. There were businesses that were left out of the picture first run through. We're not renewing another phase of it all. And so it just seems to me that it'd be really cool if we could take some of it's appropriate, it seems very appropriate, take some of that funding, maybe it's another $45,000, $50,000, and find a way to distribute that amongst the most needy.
Yeah, I think you're talking about going back to similar to what we did with the CARES money is a grant back to the businesses that apply for it. I don't know what the cost of that would be. And maybe January will give us a better picture if there's going to be some kind of Washington relief that comes down the line. But we could look at that long term, or not long term, but short term. I mean, January, February.
I'd like to see us keep a placeholder on that and be sure that we are attending it again in the near future.
Yeah, I think we will. I think we'll just see how, the next administration, if it takes office the way things are. Yeah, I think we have to see what comes out of Washington. Even if nothing comes out, then we can take a look at what additional $45,000, $50,000 may be able to bring towards the businesses. Again, it's not a lot of funding, but something's better than nothing. So I think we should look at that come January sometime and see what's up.
It would be good timing too for having our surveys done and seeing if there's any red lights that pop up for people in dire need after the surveys. And I realize the surveys are a small portion of all our businesses, but maybe between now and then we can kind of keep our feelers out for people that might be in dire need and then address it in January.
I think Mark's point is spot on. A couple of other points that have been taken. That fund balance is there for a rainy day fund, and I'm not sure we've seen much larger of a rainy day. And knock on wood, it doesn't get too much worse. But this is kind of the rainy day, and the reason those funds are there. So let's explore using them. Okay, I don't want to take up. Nanette, go ahead.
I have two quick things, President Bain. First of all, after we spoke, I did talk to a couple of our restaurant owners about the possibility just to see what their response would be, if that would be helpful to have this licensing. And their response was absolutely, every little bit helps. So I just thought I'd share that with the EDA. And then the second thing that I'll make mention of too is that it was just announced last week that DEED has another $10,000 grant program. It's the same program, but it's opening up, and I'm sure Chris knows a little bit more about that. But we're just kind of waiting on the details of that so we can get that information out, so that that fund has been replenished to some degree. And so there are going to be some funds available.
That's fantastic. And are you doing some notification and chamber newsletter or help to get the word out.
Yep,
Perfect.
absolutely. Actually, I reached out to Commissioner Grove today to see if we had the details yet. So I'm just waiting to hear when that application process is opening. Unless, of course, Chris might know more than I do, but we're waiting on the information. We've just been tag teaming, see who finds out first. So.
Excellent. Chris, we don't have a Washington County agenda or item on the agenda specific for this meeting. However, anything further you'd like to add at this time? Certainly.
Thanks, President Bain.
Feel free to do so.
Yep, thank you. So at this point in time, the CARES Act funds are allocated, and there are no application processes open. However, and I think Patrick alluded to it earlier, let's wait and see after the first of the year if there's new federal stimulus money coming. And if there is, we will certainly be ready to implement those dollars to help the businesses as soon as we can. We'll get those dollars out the door and into the hands of businesses as soon as they become available. And to Nanette's point earlier, we are still watching very closely. The governor did announce just in the last couple of weeks now that they would allocate another $10 million to those businesses that are impacted, that were ordered by executive order to close again. And so we will certainly watch, and when those funds become available, we'll let everybody know about them right away. Thank you.
Yeah, the governor talked about, he doesn't know the number yet, but sales tax forgiveness and that the people who are businesses who sell food and beverages and some other things that he's looking at. So I think we need to see what that's going to be about as well.
One piece of feedback I've received from a number of business owners over the last round of grants that we did and the requirements of that grant is for organizations that were under ownership transfer. So perhaps an existing business that residents wouldn't even think were, a new business technically because it's a new ownership structure or a new business. Because of the CARES Act, that was excluded from our grant program. However, if we were to do something on our own with some of the residual funds, maybe that is a way we could address some of those gaps. Inevitably, we're using our funds, and we can be much more specific in what those requirements are. And so it might be a way to pick up some of those that did get missed, because there were a number of those scenarios. All right, great feedback. And thank you, members of the Downtown Committee, who are here to talk about downtown to allow us to use some agenda time on this topic. Next steps, I believe, would be for Dan and Patrick and Karen. You're going to kind of take this back and kind of determine what next course of action should be. And that would come back for the EDA for approval on the December 14th meeting, since that is our next meeting. Is that the thought?
I would think that would be correct.
Okay. We've got a bit of a tight turnaround since we are trying to finalize budgets in that December 14th. So we do have an EDA meeting right before council meeting, so we can sequence that appropriately. All right, anything else on this topic? Patrick, Dan, Karen, anything else you need from us?
Not this minute, no.
All right. Next item on the agenda and part of your packet was to review through the downtown speed trailer data review. One of the common points of feedback we hear related to downtown is speed. And so there's putting this on the agenda tonight is twofold. One is to introduce you to the studies that the police department is able to do with the speed trailer, and just to kind of show you the type of data that we're able to collect. And so some of this is just education on what's available. And then secondly, to review some of the most recent speed study data that was collected in downtown, and kind of talk through what does this mean next steps, and some observations from both Chief Peterson and Ryan typically has some observations on this as well. So we will go from there. Chief, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good evening to all the EDA members. This memo that Dan put together for you is similar to the one that I presented to the City Council a few weeks ago. That might have been a couple of months ago now. One of the areas that we receive the most complaints on speed in the city is southbound Highway 61 or North Lake Street, coming down into the downtown area. So when we receive these complaints and when we don't have the speed trailer at other locations in the city, we will deploy it in that location And in the memo, I think we had in there about in front of Mallard's or Rube's Tire is a good place to have that speed trailer. And I don't know all the intricacies of the speed trailer, but I will try to kind of give you a 10,000 foot view on how it works. So the speed trailer, which was purchased about 4 years ago, and for the first 2 years, we didn't have the software available to download the data and have it available. It was more of a educate and inform speeders of their, or I should say, vehicles and drivers of their speed. In the last 2 years, we've had that, we purchased that software. So we did have the technology where we could download the data for our use and for citizens' use. If they requested it, we would forward it on to them and let them know what our findings were. Now with the speed trailer, there's two different ways that it can be utilized, actually three. One is having the actual digital speed showing, and then also collecting that data, or not having the digital speed showing and actually, so people don't think it's even on, but it still collects that data. Now, what we've done when we put it in that location by Mallard's or Rube's Tire is it's taking all that information and collecting it with vehicles that are coming southbound. Now, as you can see from the data and in the memo here, we just put down how many vehicles, which day it was deployed, on a Friday, Monday, and well, I guess all Mondays there other than that one Friday. And then the vehicles, how many vehicles from that data was collected and the average speed. And as you can see, the average speeds were anywhere from 33 miles per hour, 34, 27, and 34. And what's interesting is, and the speed trailer collects very accurate data. Some downfalls, if you want to say, is the fact that when it is collecting that data, these vehicles are coming southbound and they're going from 45 mile per hour zone down to a 30 mile per hour zone. And the radar and the trailer can actually collect that information from 1,000 feet away. So it doesn't show us exactly where that vehicle was when it collected that data. And as you know, there's also vehicles that might be turning off onto North Shore Drive from Highway 61 and or right onto 5th Avenue, 4th or 3rd Avenue. So the vehicles may be slowing down to turn. But I do believe from the data that we have collected and the perception of some individuals that really feel like cars are speeding very fast, 50 miles an hour or faster, I think that perception, that is just a perception. And as you can see from the data, the average speeds are around 30 miles per hour. Something else you have to think about too is, you know, this is a corridor where we have emergency vehicles that travel along that roadway as well. And there are times when we need to get to, as EMS and first responders, we need to get to a location fairly quickly. So some of those vehicles actually could have been ours or fire or state patrol or ambulances as well. So the information that we have here for you, if you have any questions, feel free to speak up and ask me. I'm just kind of going through some of my notes here to see if I missed anything. Are there any questions in regards to the data?
Yeah. From your point of view, this is Mark Fenneman. From your point of view, Chief, it's a reasonable amount of speed that's happening there. The average sounds good, yes. The number of people that were doing the 40 to 50 or better going through that transition were certainly the less percentage. So do you think that's a reasonable reaction to those changes in speeds and going through downtown?
Yeah, I do. You know, I drive that on Highway 61 quite often. And so I really do think that people are slowing down and they are trying to slow down to 30. we also have to remember that it's also a 2-lane highway, and then it goes down to a 1-lane. And there's many times that I've noticed, well, I might be going 30 miles per hour and there's somebody that doesn't realize they need to go into 1 lane, and they actually speed up and cut ahead of you. And I'm sure you've all seen that as well.
Does the pedestrian crossing that happens on that north end of town, is that at risk at all because of these speeds?
I don't believe so. I have not seen it. I think when there is an issue, sometimes people don't realize there's somebody standing there, and when they press that button, suddenly it goes, the lights are going off, and so they'll sometimes go through that. But I don't think with the speeds it's an issue, but that's just my opinion. Because I do think it drops down to 30 miles per hour well in advance of getting to that pedestrian crossing.
Chief, can I question for you? Does having that trailer out there, is there some kind of statistic that you have to put into the equation, realizing I'm as guilty? When you see that, all of a sudden you do find yourself slowing down quicker than you might normally?
Oh, I think that's very true. As you know, I live just out of Forest Lake and in Wyoming, and at Goodview Avenue here in Wyoming, they actually have the digital light. And believe me, every time I see that, somebody realizes you're going 35 miles per hour and it says slow down, and it definitely gets your attention. So I think you are right. I think having that speed trailer does slow people down.
So Leif Erickson here. Thank you for this information and for the, providing that. I know when I see it in my neighborhood, it catches my eye. Is that placement where we're coming from 4 lanes or 2 lanes down to 1, in the context of the downtown business area that we've been focused on? I mean, that feels like the outer edge of this downtown that we've been talking about. I mean, my office is right here in the LaBelle building, former Carter's Jewelry. When I sit out there in the lobby, I mean, I hear these trucks just dropping the hammer coming out of that roundabout, and if I walk over to get lunch somewhere downtown, I mean, it feels like Frogger. And this is a long ways away from, that roundabout area is a long ways away from Mallard's, because you're right, there is that crosswalk at that end of that business district. I wish there was another one down by Wells Fargo. And I wish the roundabout had the flashing lights like the roundabout over at the school does, but we don't have that. I don't know, I'd be curious what everybody else thinks. And I think at downtown speeds, I don't think about that end, because I know I'm leaving town, I'm getting up to 45 or I'm slowing down and weaving into traffic. It just feels like it's a different setting in this downtown area.
Yeah, I do agree that, I've seen it many times myself, driving through town as many times as I do each and every day. And as noted in the memo, not only do we utilize the speed trailer, but whenever we get complaints or when officers aren't taking calls, that is one area that we'll sit down at, is the roundabout or north of downtown or even south of downtown, and try to slow people down and educate and inform. And if it's warranted, they'll receive a citation. So we definitely know that this downtown area is an area of concern for a lot of citizens. We do receive quite a bit of complaints every year in regards to speed, and probably about the same amount of complaints in regards to vehicles not stopping for pedestrians when they're crossing at the roundabout or at the north pedestrian crossing site as well.
Susan, go ahead.
One of the challenges is people not stopping at that crosswalk. And toward the wintertime, the state takes away the little square thing that says pedestrian crossing. And I know that when we put that back, or asked to have that put back in the spring, it does make people aware. And I think that one of the biggest challenges in that area is, I like the description of Frogger, trying to make sure that folks actually realize that even though they're going through a roundabout, they have to stop for folks in the crosswalks. And in any enforcement action that y'all have an opportunity, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and as all of us have driven, I'm sure you've realized it as well as you're coming up to that roundabout. And suddenly you're looking for vehicles and making sure that there's a clear way to go. And I have to admit, I'm one of them. There's been a couple of times where something I looked and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even see that person right there that was just ready to start walking. And I've seen it happen many times as well. And so it is a difficult location. And but yeah, we do try to sit down there and enforce.
Is there any push button lighting system, like when you push on the light post for the crossing a street, the other intersections, is there a way for a pedestrian in the roundabout to push a button that will flash something in the appropriate lane to slow down?
Ryan, if you don't mind, you know a little bit more about the MnDOT and some of the rules and regulations and statutes and different things you have to, hoops and all those things you have to go through in regards to those types of equipment.
Yeah, no problem. So, I'll just first start with the original project. The roundabouts, construction, I think was 2010 or 2009 that finished in the downtown project. There used to be a mid-block crossing kind of by the open parking lots, then across at the barbershop area right there. That was just a flashing yellow light that would work and not much visibility. Parking was allowed on both sides. Part of that original project, MnDOT required it to be located where it's at. And then we took a significant amount of parking away, so it would make the pedestrians standing at the edge of the curb more visible to oncoming traffic. Got a lot of pushback from businesses on that. That obviously made access to their businesses, especially the vacuum shop that used to be there, much more difficult for them to get customers in and out of their door. But it was the requirement per MnDOT to improve the sight distance of pedestrians there. Now, obviously, annually we're working with MnDOT on overall reviews of the downtown performance roundabout. Originally, it was a 2-lane roundabout. We had a significant number of fender benders that were occurring there, and just, dangerous for pedestrians too, because there was basically not enough traffic in that roundabout. Thus, people were changing lanes within it because there was so much more flexibility and room to move, but then no, awareness of pedestrians trying to walk through that area and stuff like that. MnDOT did restripe it to a single roundabout, and you've seen significantly the number of fender benders reduced. Still, there's always the concern, the speed of traffic through there, and that's where the increased patrols over the year have helped some of that. And, just the size and diameter of the roundabout is smaller than what normal standards you'll see today. Thus, between conflict points, the drivers entering and exiting the roundabout, you have less space to look and be observant that a pedestrian's there. Now, fast forward to what we just did down at Goodview and Highway 97 with the roundabout there. That is the first roundabout in the state of Minnesota on a trunk highway to have 4 rectangular rapid flashing beacon systems. We pushed and pushed and pushed and got that approved by MnDOT. So that's all brand new, and they're obviously following that one very closely. We're trying to propose it elsewhere in the states, as we think it works very well. And the percentage of success of the rapid flashing beacon system versus the Hawk system downtown has a much more higher percentage users that follow that too. So that's how we got the 4 rectangular rapid flashing beacons down at the roundabout at Goodview and Highway 97. Obviously, that's something that's probably going to be part of the conversation in the next several years at the downtown roundabouts. And part of why we didn't have that at the double roundabout project 6197 is we were able to get federal funding that constructed the pedestrian bridge over the movements there. Going back to the speeds that we do see, I think they're in general conformance of what is the posted speed limits now. I don't, even if you did a speed study, which MnDOT would have to do because they're the road authority on this roadway. I don't see anything would change. You know, we're potentially closer to the side of 30 miles an hour being posted to a 35. But before you would make that, you would narrow down where you're actually capturing those speeds and stuff like that. But those outliers at 50 plus that you see within the data, no matter what you post or do, they're not going to follow the signage out there. So the only way to deal with that is enforcement. You put your patrol, a state patrol at this intersection every day, all week long, then you're not obviously patrolling anything else in the city. And I mean, we have a number of these hot spots that we deal with. We hit these areas more than often with the speed trailer and stuff. And, you know, certainly it does slow a driver down when they see that trailer and the digital stuff popping up. But this is also an area we're pushing for MnDOT to get in your CIP, because on Highway 61, believe it or not, there is nothing in MnDOT's short-term or 10-year CIP on 61 north of the double roundabouts that were just constructed on the south end of town. They do have stuff in their plans from that intersection down to Hugo on 61, but nothing northward. And I just can't believe that. And I respectfully disagreed with them. And I said they need to review it again, because just along with the pavement, there's no way it's going to make 10 years. So just if they came in with a mill and overlay project, there's a lot of things we can do with signage and striping that will provide as traffic calming measures that would help some of this stuff. Certainly on the north end, you know, at some point in time, I don't foresee a 2-lane 61 all the way to the bridge at Highway 8. It's not needed for capacity. You got single lane to the north and the south. So if that ever went away too, that's another opportunity to where you could gang land to adjacent property owners that would allow larger business expansions, plus a tighter corridor, which would lead to traffic calming and better pedestrian facilities. So those are things that are all also identified in your Trunk Highway 61 aesthetics and water quality plan, where we talked about have those pedestrian corridors on the sides of the 61 on the north end there. So that's stuff that we'll probably be talking about later as we bring in the planning aspect of things.
Ryan, thank you. Thank you for those perspectives. And Chief Peterson, thank you for the information. I think Ryan, you touched on this a little bit about this MnDOT being the road authority. Can you talk about what the city is able to do and what we can't do, and what's in our lane, pardon my pun, and where do we have to partner with the state as it relates to certainly design, maintenance, or even setting a speed limit?
So when it comes to an overall project, the state's, going to plan accordingly what they have in their CIPs. It's never going to be as aggressive as what the local authority would want. Therefore, MnDOT's more than welcome to have the local authority take on the project and lead it. Potentially they provide funding or not. Typically, the local authority at a minimum would line that up with the maintenance project. So at least you'd have that portion of project funding. But MnDOT projects are very, very expensive. And they love pounding stuff off to the locals. And I cautioned you not to be too aggressive on some of this stuff. And they should be, carting a horse instead of the city all the time. Because when you look at the roundabout project down at Goodview, yeah, they were more than welcome for the city to lead that project. And we know what sacrifices we had to make on our state aid funding. Right. We were fortunate enough to find some federal money, and then we got some more money from MnDOT, and then we had a nice pot of money coming at the end when we fulfilled a bunch of requirements, and the project design went really well, and which helped our state aid balance there significantly. But you got to go through every department of review on their projects and be prepared to model the traffic 3 different ways, 3 different softwares, and just all the other things that go along with the project. And to lead something like that, it's easier if it were to actually get turned back to Washington County, which has been talked about in the past, but just because of funding mechanisms and reasons, it's not occurred yet in the Forest Lake area. But the downtown roundabouts and sidewalk improvements, the city did lead that project through a cooperative agreement. Washington County obviously led Broadway Avenue with a lot of city support and a bunch of other stuff that required a lot of turnbacks, and that's how the city got North Shore Trail along First, Second, and Third Lake, and you know the condition of that one now. So there's a lot of give and take on stuff, and we're the the last person there, so they would rather have the locals do it, but it's going to cost us more money if we lead a project this size, and because of the road authority. Now, last August 2019, the state changed the way they go about basically setting speeds. They did give the authority to the locals on their local roadways, but that does not apply to state or county roadways. League of Minnesota is still developing some policies on how you would go about still making that a legal way of enforcement. So right now, kind of what we've been doing is still following the same way MnDOT would go about reviewing a roadway corridor. We would obviously gather the speed stuff like we just did. MnDOT's going to go through a much stricter review. They're going to look at driveway spacing all the time, just like we would do vertical, horizontal curves, anything that stuff that's in a roadway characteristic. And then obviously the driver's characteristics to come at the end to develop a formal speed. But with the stuff that we have collected, I don't foresee any posted speed limits would change with the information we have available now.
A helpful perspective. Thank you. Members of the committee, what other questions do you have of either Ryan or Chief Peterson on this topic? Again, our goal is to just kind of illustrate the tools that are available and what those studies show, and then also just a little bit of additional information on what is kind of within our reach as a city and where are we partnering with the state. Susan, go ahead.
Having just gone through a speed study and trying to implement it citywide in St. Paul, the only thing that will really, even if you change the speed limits, the only thing that will really help is enforcement. And we've probably got 6,020 is plenty signs scattered throughout St. Paul right now. And the feedback that we're getting from residents is, even though the speed limits changed, the car speeds have not.
Other questions on this topic? Again, goal for tonight is to provide some foundational information, certainly on kind of what does the data show, and then what are some of the tools at our disposal as we're thinking about future next steps as it relates to downtown. Certainly traffic and pedestrian safety is one of the top topics that comes up every time we talk about this. All right, not seeing any other questions coming from the members of the committee. Let's move on to our next agenda item. Dan, downtown planning scope of work and review. Dan's going to walk us through a proposal and want some opportunity to get this group's feedback on next steps and kind of completeness. Dan, go ahead.
Absolutely. President Bain, members of the EDA and Downtown Committee. What you have on page 9 of your packet is the downtown planning scope of work. So where this document came from is, as you recall, we've gone through SWOT analysis, we started work plan exercises. All of that information was sort of, put together to start form the basis for this documentation. Now, this document is the one that actually goes out to planners when they're looking to bid on, when they ask what are you looking for in downtown, in a downtown plan. This document forms the basis for what what they're supposed to design their scope for, what their plan will look like at the end. One thing for me that always tends to help, I'm a visual person, so instead of just looking at words on a page, I like to kind of show examples of what a downtown plan can look like. So I did track down a couple of downtown plans just to show what the end result of a downtown plan actually is. So let me get my screen share here. what you have on your screen is just a couple of excerpts from plans. These plans, when you look at them, can be pretty robust. They're anywhere from 50 to 150 pages. They're graphic intensive. They're pretty dense documents. So I just took a few examples out just to kind of show what these words on the page in this proposal actually turn into, what the end product looks like. What you see here is just the downtown plan from Chaska. I believe this was done maybe 10 plus years ago. But it shows just sort of the maps that you get as a result of the downtown planning. Here you have the planning area, and then you have some of the, kind of the specific, areas within that larger area. So you have the Main Street destinations. You have some sites that they identified as catalyst redevelopment sites. And then you have the downtown gateways. How do you get in? So you kind of see here, you have the whole, downtown area, but it is kind of subgrouped into subsections. And then if you go further into the plan, you'll see here, you start to see this basically like on parcel information and start to see what does the potential redevelopment on the actual parcels look like. So you see the larger view of what the whole area can look like. And then the plan, typically they dive down into actual parcel level data here. And then also over here, you see some parcel level data. Another key component in a lot of these plans are connections. You don't want to plan a downtown without thinking about how it connects to the rest of the area, the rest of the city. So you see here in Chaska, again, they looked at how does it connect? What are the thoroughfares? How do people get into downtown? And what do they do when they get in there? So you start to see how does the downtown area connect with the larger city. Here's another example of a plan. Again, this kind of shows the same thing. This whole area up in here with the different colors is the area that they planned. But you see them, what this particular group did was they broke it down by character. So you see character A, C, B, and D. Again, kind of gives you the visual how they start to group land use within the downtown area. One particular thing I liked about this plan was that when they looked at it, they didn't just look at it from an infrastructure standpoint. They also looked at it, how can you program downtown to make it an active environment? And I didn't go into full detail how they recommended it, but they do see here that this downtown park here, one of the proposals is how can you design this park to promote active engagement? Like what programming can you put in that park? So these plans don't just solely focus on infrastructure. They also focus on how do you activate that infrastructure to create a vibrant downtown area. So that's just a few examples as to what this sort of scope at the end comes out the other side. So wanted to give that just as some background. So as we start to go through this scope, we can start to kind of at least have an idea as to what a downtown plan can look like. What's actually being proposed here tonight is it's a single downtown plan, but it's actually broken down into 4 different phases. The first phase would be evaluation. Second phase is concept development and public input. The third phase is market testing. And then the final phase is refinement and adoption. Within phase 1, this is where the consultant would come in and basically evaluate the current conditions in downtown. What's the current land use, property ownership, what's the city-owned land, how is that being utilized? Also, as part of that, they'll review the pedestrian and vehicle traffic patterns. Not only do they want to see what's the current state of land, they want to see how people are interacting with that, how they're getting there, what are they doing when they're downtown. Just trying to get that snapshot of current conditions. Once phase 1 is completed, then they move into phase 2. And what phase 2 is envisioning is the concept development and public input. This particular proposal is asking the consultant to develop three land use scenarios. So we have some different options on the table. We're not just going to get one option at the end, that we're going to work off of. We're going to have multiple options to work and develop the ultimate plan. This is very similar to what was done with the airport layout plan. When we went through that process, they presented, I believe it was 3 or 4 different possible options for how that land could be used. And through the course of evaluation and conversation, we ended up with the ultimate one that was selected. So again, here we're looking to ask them to provide 3 different land use scenarios. Also, as part of this process, we're going to go out to the community to gather public input on the plans. Want to make sure that we're not planning in a vacuum. We want to make sure that we do have the public engagement on the planning process. And we'll also solicit input from boards and commissions during this phase as well. At the end of phase two, we'll have the three different plans to consider. Moving into phase three, this is actually where we take those plans and do a market test. We want to make sure that the market is capable or willing to develop the plan that we present. We want to make sure that that plan is based in reality, it's based in the market. So what's presented here for phase three is that we actually will take these plans, work with the Urban Land Institute, who has come out to Forest Lake in the past and gave us sort of their free overview assessment of Forest Lake. This is a much more detailed plan review. So they actually will assemble a technical assistance panel. They'll review all three scenarios that the consultant develops, and then their team of experts will give that market input on the viability of the plan. They'll make sure that what we have in our plan, the market, will bear. There is possibility for development of that plan. So that's the phase three market testing. And then based on the results of that phase three, that information will then go back, the consultant will take it, refine the final plan based on all of that input to date, and then bring forward the final plan for adoption. So that's the final phase there. And then just kind of showing what the roadmap, what's the timeline for that planning look like. Right now, in quarter one, we'll be doing phase one. That's where we hire the planner and begin the planning process. That phase one is going to be completed in quarter one. In quarter two of 21, basically that's the meat and potatoes of the planning process. That's where we're into phase two. Those three plans are developed within that phase two in quarter two of 21. As of right now, we're looking at quarter three to do the market test, bring that back to market to make sure the market will bear the plan. And then in phase four, in quarter four, we'll bring back and do the final adjustments to the plan, and then get that plan approved. And then we move from the planning stage to the execution stage. One thing that you'll note in the document is that it does say the request of the consultant to assist in the prioritization of the implementation of the plan. One reason I put that in there was I didn't want the plan at the end of all the work to go sit on the shelves, just sort of like what happened in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they go through that huge effort, get the Ark, and all of a sudden it kind of goes and gets lost in government storage. I wanted to make sure that this plan does not just get stuck on a shelf and sort of list there as a relic. I want to make sure that we do move into that implementation phase and begin to execute on that plans. And to that note, I have asked in some initial conversations with consultants to, at the end of phase two, when we have those three sort of draft plans to work off of, I asked them to give us some, their opinion on what are some of those high value investments that we can make. I don't want to miss a full budget cycle, so I want to make sure that we start to have some of those, what is the potential investments that we could do in 22 to make sure that we get those accounted for in 22's budget. So at the end of phase two, those consultants that I've spoken with have said, yes, they'd be able to present some at least draft ideas, some rough numbers that we could start to implement. So we're not having to sit a full year, and waiting for the next budget cycle to happen. We will be teed up so we can start to execute on this plan. Right now, main points of contention for the downtown, main points of discussion for the downtown committee would be, does this proposed scope match the expectations? Is this align with what the downtown committee wants in a downtown plan? Does this match up with your expectations? I'm also here to answer any questions you may have regarding the process. Just on a high level, next steps, what's envisioned at this point would be to reach out to consultants, give them this, scope of work, and then to have the consultants groups come into the January downtown committee, a group of selected consultants, and have them present their proposals. So you can meet the different planning groups, ask them specific questions on their proposal. Based on the feedback from that January session, would be to bring a proposal for the EDA consideration in February, get it approved in February, then we can start doing that planning process, and then follow through the rest of the phases as laid out in this presentation. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the process, and we'll also assist in the discussion on the scope.
Go ahead.
I've got three that you can probably handle all together. One, the civic engagement piece. Forest Lake is not good at that. Those of us that work through the comp plan and various other planning efforts, I would really appreciate hearing from the consultants as you evaluate consultants how they're going to engage with Forest Lake. We don't do that well. I want to make sure that the work that was done before by the chamber and by the city is a part of the plan. And then will each of those three possibilities have some sort of ballpark of dollars that will be required to implement the plans?
To address your first two questions on the engagement process, that is the first question I've asked all of the consultants, especially, given the fact that we are in a COVID remote environment, and the first question I always say to the consultants I talk to them, I say, I've personally found just trying to get planning processes done over a remote environment, that process does not transfer very well. I mean, you can make it work, but it's much better done in person. And I said, we have the COVID barrier, plus we have this normal civic engagement barrier. They said they have methods that they're finding that are effective in getting people to the table in terms of remote or engagement. But I'd rather defer that specific question to them during their presentations and how they're going to handle that. I have not got into, what these plans will actually cost at the end of the day. My conversation level with them at this point has been more process driven, sort of just getting the feel, the lay of the land, and looking at, what they can bring to the table. I haven't asked them specifically for, an engineering manual or a project manual, so to speak, to say, this project is going to cost you X amount. But in looking at a couple of their consultants' other work, I know that they are capable of doing that. I just haven't specifically requested it for this project.
Mark, I think you had your, go ahead.
I don't have any real challenge to the general outline of what you're trying to accomplish. You got to feed the planners with something to guide them in terms of their proposal. I do have a couple specific thoughts. At the end of what you sent us in terms of information, there was also the highway business district kind of isolated in a diagram. Are we talking uniquely about the downtown district?
We are. In conversation with the plan, I said I want them to look at how that connects in with the other business districts within Forest Lake. So we're not just specifically looking at downtown. We want to make sure that is there a way to draw traffic from the highway business district into downtown, for example. So that's why that was included in there. That's so they're aware of all of the different commercial districts within the city. But
okay,
the planning would focus on downtown.
Okay, that's fair enough. When you talk about the second consultant and you kind of name one entity, the Urban Land Institute, they really can't come forward with any kind of proposal until they see a planning outcome. So they're not going to be in the picture in terms of cost until that time, right?
They should be able to present a proposal, and I have to go through and have the the deeper dive conversations with my contact at ULI. But they are in the process of reviewing plans. So, I mean, we tell them, here's what the plan will look like. They can give me a level of confidence in terms of a bid for what that cost will be for the review, because it's all based on technical assistance panel reviews, and we can just say, here's what we're bringing to the table and, get a bid based on that.
Okay. They're going to come up with three scenarios and present three scenarios. But in a situation like our downtown, with all the infill spots and the transition of aged structures on through, it's going to be where pieces of each of those plans could be very valid. And so once we see all three, it's difficult for me to understand how they hone it down to one, unless all three still become potentials. So when we get to the point where we've tried to hone it down to a singular final idea, I think that's where a real dilemma exists.
And I think that is a great question, and I will defer to the consultants to answer that, because I agree. I think that there's something in when you look at how you combine three different potentially mutually exclusive plans. How do you bring those together? But I would ask you that's a great question to ask when they come in and present their ideas in January, because they should be able to give you that answer specifically for that question.
Thanks.
And I just forgot to, in terms of Susan's questions about the previous plans that were done, I have made them all aware that that information is there, and I've asked them to review that as part of the phase one. So we're not planning, we're not going to try to recreate the wheel here. They're going to start on those existing plans. So those are going to be considered.
I've got a question.
Jerry, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1 second, Jenny. Jerry, I think you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I think it's a generally a fairly comprehensive request. A couple of questions for you. What is the total funding that's available for this?
Right now, we have a grant with Washington County, and I have to take a look at how much has been spent. I want to say the grant total was $40,000 with a 1-to-1 match. So we had $40,000 that we kicked in. Washington County put in $40,000. A portion of that has been spent on the sewer shed study. I'd have to go through and get the exact total of that has been allocated for that. So there are funds available, but we also have, discussed earlier, fund balance to assist with the payment of this particular planning project.
Dan, I had a kind of piggyback question. I want to make sure that this is fully included in the 2021 EDA budget. And you mentioned using ULI in phase 3 for market testing. Is that a separate, is there a separate cost component to that? And is that a separate item that we need to have budgeted that maybe isn't?
It is a separate budget item. I'm still waiting to get the actual hard numbers from the consultants at this point to see what the actual number is there. It's recommended, to have an outside group, a third-party group, take a look at the plans to make sure that you're getting honest feedback. I wouldn't necessarily want I'm not going to give as honest a criticism of my daughter as say a stranger would be, just because I have, it's my daughter. I'm going to try to, not be as critical, but that ULI is going to come in and give you that honest assessment of the plan. So that's why we'd go with them, and that's why it would be recommended to engage a second contract with them. But that would be considered in the total cost of the scope, although it would be a separate line item within that total cost.
And all of the planners that you're talking to are all aware of this step of testing with ULI, and they've all, there's some agreement of that being included in the process. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. Yeah. All my initial conversations, I've said that we want to take a market assessment of this, and they've all said that's a great idea. They've all been supportive of that idea, mainly because you want to make sure that these plans have a basis in market. You don't want to have the plan basis be a 300 key hotel right on the waterfront if the market's never going to bear that. So that's where the ULI comes in and says, when their development group and their technical assistant expertise comes in and says, yes, this portion will work, this portion won't, this has a possibility of working if everything kind of lines up. So that market feedback is invaluable in the whole, as to the process overall.
Thank you. Jerry, I hijacked your question. I want to go back and make sure you got your question answered, and if you had anything else.
Yeah, I have a few other questions. So how many RFPs are you sending out?
As of right now, I've interviewed or had initial conversations with 2 planning firms, and I'm waiting to hear back from a couple other ones as well. So it's going to be in that 4 to 5. And I also have to see how their books of business line up. Want to make sure that those I reach out to have availability on our time frame to plan as well, and that their end product is in alignment with what we're looking for. Some planning firms are very much project based, where they'll give you a very detailed, almost like a street manual saying, here's item 1, 2, and 3. But so we're looking at a handful at this point, but I think the intent would be to bring 2 or 3 back to the January meeting so we can, review the proposals from those 2 to 3.
Yeah, I would sure recommend that we have at least 3 if possible. I think 2 makes it difficult. 3, I think, is always that tiebreaker when you're struggling with that, particularly from a cost standpoint. So, I mean, I think if we're having trouble finding 3 qualified, competent firms, we need to step back and think about that a little bit, because I think it's important to have a good blend of people responding to something like this. One of the other questions I have on the scope of work under phase 1 evaluation, Dan, you kind of talk about evaluate the current environment of the area to be studied. One of the things I think we need to stress a little bit stronger to the planners, and maybe we can do it, you know, at some point once we make a selection, I guess, but make sure they understand it from a cost standpoint. And that is, you know, the study of what happens down at the lake in detail. That drives so much downtown things. And I'm talking the public boat launch down there, all the dock area, Lakeside Park and so forth. That gets complicated. And I think we want to make sure that they fully understand how that will ultimately flow and the implications of that area to the whole downtown planning area. So maybe we can just make sure they understand, you know, that information may not be as readily available to them because it's kind of a little unique. So maybe we have to kind of make sure they might have to spend a little extra time on that when they're in that planning stage.
And that is a good point. And that is one thing that I have brought up in initial conversations that, you know, we have the big asset down there of the lake and want to make sure that we protect it and that we activate it in a way that encourages use of that. So when a lot of the planners see, you know, Lakeside Memorial Park down there, you know, they know, I mean, the ones I've spoken with at least have, you know, a pretty decent idea of what's involved in planning around a lake or planning around that asset. So, you know, again, I'm assuming when the bids come through that they're going to be cognizant of the fact that there is some unique challenges to planning around an asset such as a lake.
Right. Okay. And one thing in here, I guess, you talk about input from the public, and it was brought up by someone else about, you know, seems to be very difficult in a COVID environment to get input from the public when you're trying to do it remote on Zoom. So, you know, the schedule of having all this done by the end of the second quarter of 2021, I think is doable and is great. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that if we don't get the right input back because we can't have in-person meetings with the public, then the end of second quarter may not be the appropriate time to complete the task.
Again, great point. I think when I put these timelines together, I mean, I should have put a big asterisk on every single one of these saying, you know, dependent, you know, I mean, the situation is ever evolving, you know, in terms of COVID, in terms of how does planning work. But,
right.
You know, to your point, in terms of public input, you know, we've heard from Washington County, some of their virtual open houses have been extremely well attended, and they've solicited quite a lot of feedback. So it is possible, but it definitely does present a unique set of challenges that weren't there a year ago.
Okay. So the last question I have for you is, you have a schedule that the planners come back to is it the January meeting or the December meeting? January meeting to present?
January. Mm-hmm.
January to present, okay, to this body here, I guess, both the downtown committee and EDA. And then the February would be the approval by EDA of one of the planners, or selection of the planner, I guess.
Correct. Yeah, the EDA would have to make the selections, and the downtown committee would not have the authority to enter into the contract. That has to go back to the EDA. Right. So
okay.
The presentation happens here, approval at the EDA.
Okay. All right. Just needed that clarification. That's the only questions I have.
Very good. Mark, hold on just 1 second. Jenny, I think you had a question.
Yeah,
previously.
This might be for Patrick Casey. In their projections, will they be taking into account the different tax bases for residential, commercial, retail, and then the city, how much of it is going to be city land? Will this be like a weighted evaluation? So will we be getting numbers of what will add to the tax base of the city?
So just so I got the question, when we're looking at the future land use, like when they bring their proposals together, they're going to say, here's the value impact to the city, so we can look at what the potential future taxable revenues would be off the land in downtown.
Okay.
And just on the future land use, I mean, the intent is that basically I've told them that, you know, the city does have quite a few parcels of land down there that need to be a part of that conversation, you know, so they're going to take a look at this whole thing from a whole cloth perspective, but then also that's the critical portion of the market test, to make sure that what they bring forward isn't going to be something that just creates a pretty map, but there is an actual, you know, reality in there. So those tax numbers that do come out of this are going to be based in reality and not sort of based on, you know, what makes the best map.
Jenny, that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Mark, go ahead.
I do think a lot of questions, concerns, promotions will come forward as soon as we have a planner in tow and they're working on something, because I think that's when you can really dig in. But I really want to emphasize the fact that we have a couple, maybe 3-4 businesses trailing along with us right now and participating actively. And the catch is going to come back in the days when you could really meet with people. You could just draw them all into a big room and talk very intimately about what the general idea is, and then you could pull them into intimate one-on-one conversations about what it means to them specifically, where they felt comfortable to talk about it. So our catch is going to be having that happen somehow down the line. But I do think there's lots of challenges, concerns, promotions we can bring forward to the planner as they start to develop whatever their scenarios are. And I do think the scenarios will not eliminate, there'll be a lot of repeat pieces in the 3 scenarios, because it's hard to kind of exclude one good idea on one site and say, let's come up with a whole nother story for that site again. So it's kind of hard to accomplish those things, but that's when it's all going to happen. I just really hope we can pull in the businesses so that we can really have a personal conversation about the details that happen to their business on their site.
That's really, really well said. And back to Susan's point around engagement, and what does that engagement plan look like, both from the community, but also the specific businesses that are impacted. As we are looking at this scope of work and the proposed timeline, anything that's missing that you want to, that we haven't addressed, that you want to make sure is included in those proposals? Otherwise, this is essentially the foundation document for that RFP and will be the basis that those proposals and presentations are based on. I will also just say a quick note for calendar purposes. This will be the last meeting of this group for the year. And so the next time this group gets together will be in January, that 4th Monday in January, and it will be to hear these proposals. So a lot of work behind the scenes on Dan's part, of coordination of effort between now and then, but this is kind of the last chance to be aligned on both timeline as well as scope. Jerry mentioned timeline and wanting to make sure we've got the right plan in place, and certainly make sure we've got enough time to get the right engagement. That needs to be a factor in it. I do, though, also appreciate the interim step that Dan has suggested, which would be to have a pause and some interim feedback so that we are able to inject anything that we would want to see in the 2022 budget during the summer of 2021, or else if that isn't fully baked until deeper into 2021, we essentially miss a full funding year because we can't go back to the well. So we will at least want to have some placeholders next summer so that we can get some items considered in the budget for 2022. Nature of the beast, our preliminary, tax levy has to be certified in September. And there's adjustments that can happen in the 4th quarter, but those numbers do need to come together fairly early in the summer for them to be under consideration. So there's a number of pros and cons with that timeline, but I think the plan that Dan has outlined at least allows us to get started and to get some placeholders for things we want to see happen in 2022. We've had lots of feedback from EDA members and Susan, Robert and Matt as being kind of business owners specifically on this call. Any other points of consideration or things you'd like us to consider at this point?
This is Bob Anderson. I can't think of any right now. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. All right, Dan, anything further, actually, before I throw it back to you, members of the committee and EDA members, anything further, any other questions at this point? All right, not hearing anything. Dan, anything further you need from us?
No, I think I have enough to take this back and get the bids back and the proposals back from the planners, and I will bring them back to the January meeting. So get all your questions prepared, and feel free to grill them with as detailed questions as you want that I can't answer, but that's what these consultants are paid to do. So bring all the hard questions to January.
Perfect. EDA members, we will have a meeting on December 14th, and that'll be our regular EDA meeting. That will be our only meeting for the month of December. And so with that, I will wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. And if we don't see you before the end of the year, a fantastic holiday season. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move we adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. And Karen, can we do just a quick roll call for adjournment?
Member Roberts,
Aye.
Member Huntash,
Aye.
Member Husnick,
Aye.
Member Finneman,
Aye.
Member Lorge,
Aye.
Member Erickson,
Aye.
and President Bain.
Thank you, everybody, for the input this evening. Have a great evening, and we are adjourned.